Hello and welcome to Management Training. This is a series of 3 videos which is part of the emergency telecommunications training which has been brought to you by UNICEF. My name is Mark Hawkins. I work for Save the Children International as the Global Humanitarian Technology Manager. My role in Save the Children is to manage all of the infrastructure, which is networking, connectivity, but also I manage disaster response. This means that since 2016, I've been running a training program for responders for Save the Children. I also partner with organizations like the Emergency Telecoms Cluster, the ETC, and also UNICEF, so that we are delivering excellent training across our different organizations. So in this section, we're going to be talking about in the first video that is, we're going to be talking about why ICT needs to deploy to a disaster. We're going to talk about service delivery. And then in the following videos, we're going to talk about teamwork and engaging stakeholders. So first of all, let's take a bit of a dive into what ICT actually is. And this is where we come across our first problem. I've been in the sector for over 20 years, and people sort of view the ICT profession as a bunch of geeks that just do computers. And there's a certain bunch of people that may think that having a technician in a disaster setting is not necessarily needed. And hopefully this is a sort of trend that's going to go away, because this sort of idea that we don't need a geek, the guy that scrabbles under the table, plugging in computers, that's an idea that's going to go away, I hope, because actually these ideas come out of people's sort of traditional interaction with the ICT profession, which is password resets and getting printers going. That's about it. What they don't understand often is all the work that we do to put the infrastructure in place in a disaster setting. And of course, the technology that we use for supporting disasters is increasing all the time. So in addition to the computers, we've got other things like we use satellite technology to provide internet. Internet technology is expensive for a satellite, so we use other techniques to beam internet connectivity from a satellite dish across to other locations up to 15 kilometers away. We're also seeing the deployment of technology for communities. So instead of just providing connectivity for the responders, sometimes we're going to be called upon to actually cover huge areas, maybe refugee camps, IDP camps, with Wi-Fi connectivity for the benefit of the communities that we support. And we've got some of the new technologies coming in, like unmanned aviation systems, or drones as it's popularly called, Internet of Things, monitors, cameras, all sorts of new technologies that need setting up, supporting, and managing. So there's a huge amount of work there. And the other thing that is actually creeping into our work is actually the management of electricity, because without electricity, the technology doesn't work. And by default, that sometimes comes to us as the ICT custodians, because electricity is a thing that's actually fallen between the cracks. So there's a huge amount of work for us to do in the first wave on an emergency. But brand IT is still a massive issue. We still have those barriers where people don't always want to talk to us, and sometimes we've not actually helped ourselves because we use sometimes complex technical language when engaging with different stakeholders. So there's a little bit of work to be done, but it is improving, especially with the millennial people now coming in and arriving in senior management positions. So the tech savvy team leaders is going to be the future, and it makes our job a lot easier when we actually arrive at the response. So let's look at some of the details now. The service delivery is actually really, really important because I firmly believe, from many, many years' experience, that ICT professionals need to be at the response from the very beginning. And for many of our organizations, the thing that we need to be sort of prepared for is making sure that we have an idea what we're going to do when we arrive on the ground. We have clear visions about the technology we're going to deploy. And I think the key word for this is preparedness. And through the preparedness, we actually we are ready to mobilize before a disaster happens. So here's a few things that we kind of do in many organizations, particularly Save the Children. So first of all, we run a training program, very much like the ETT, and in fact, we actually send some of our people, Save the Children staff, to the ETT for training, because this is an excellent forum where we develop the skills, and then at the end of the training, we run scenarios so that people get the opportunity to put into practice their technical skills, but also working together as a team to try and solve problems. And what I would suggest to people is that after ETT training, there's no reason why you cannot form within your own organizations scenarios to practice for yourselves. And then that way you get a bit stronger. The bottom line is we want to provide technology that just works. Okay, it just works. Simple as that. The humanitarian teams, they arrive at the mission, the Wi-Fi just works, and people can just crack on and do their job. The security communications will just work, so that if there's an issue, the fleet management can always contact the vehicles, the security staff can always contact the remote sites and get information and pass information. So it's all critical infrastructure and services that we're putting in place. So the preparedness is we train people for that. And the second thing is we actually form a roster, and then we also have equipment on standby for response. And different organizations will come at this from different directions. So in my organization, Save the Children, we have pre-positioned equipment in Nepal, Nairobi, and Panama. So it means that we have got equipment closer to the places where disasters are likely to occur. So when the decision is made to deploy, then we have equipment pre-positioned, which means we can set up at least an office, maybe two offices, and then on the back of that, we'll have framework agreements, which enables us to rapidly purchase equipment as we scale up. The people are really, really important. So it's not about training people from the global north to go to the countries that's affected. We want to sort of turn this around in a big way, so that instead of sending people on long flights to get to a disaster setting, preferably it's better that we get people from the same country or the region. And this gives us some benefits. And the benefits are this. People get there quicker, which means we can start getting set up quicker. Local people will have a better understanding of local cultures and customs. Very, very often, the local people will have lots of local knowledge about the suppliers and the technologies that is actually available in country. Local people often speak the same local language as the communities that we support. And that, I think, is groundbreaking because it removes a lot of the barriers that sometimes we face. And finally, when we use local people, particularly from the nation where the disaster's taking place, sometimes a disaster zone is classed as a sensitive area and only nationals from that country is allowed to the disaster zone to render assistance. International people are sometimes blocked. And we've actually come across this on a number of occasions in recent years, particularly in Indonesia. That was a place following a tsunami where only local people were able to attend the front line. It's not a problem, okay, because I think we run more efficient operations when we train and use local people. So that's people, skills, kit. Now, the final piece of the jigsaw puzzle is standard operating procedures. So it's actually making sure that we've got the right people with the right kit at the front line, but they've got a guideline in the form of SOPs, which essentially is this book, to be quite honest, and that takes you through the sort of things that we would do in the response, from planning infrastructure using standard materials, identifying what it's going to cost, and then estimating the budget, and a whole range of other sort of tasks like service delivery. So really, really important that we kind of have some clear ideas of what we're going to do. And the important thing is that when we're sort of delivering services, we cannot make everything work immediately the day we arrive. It's impossible. So it means that as managers, you're going to have to be looking at prioritizing what the tasking is. So it might be things like setting up the VSAT. It might be setting up the radio communications that will take the priority over all other tasking. That's really, really important, because it's important to deliver the stuff that's going to support everybody, as opposed to supporting the individual that might be struggling with printing. Now, of course, when we have to prioritize tasking, there's going to be winners and losers, and we have to have a really good communications strategy around informing people that these are going to be your priorities in the first few days. But you can give them some reassurance that as you start to scale up the operation and get new people into the arena, then you'll be able to respond more quickly to some of the individual issues that will crop up from time to time. So that's kind of really, really important to manage the expectations. The next thing is actually managing conflict, because sometimes we will get situations where the people that we're providing support to, they may get a bit sort of angry or grumpy, frustrated, particularly if a piece of technology is not working. So on that basis, we have to calm people down. But as managers, we sometimes have to intervene, especially if an end user is being particularly rude to any of the team. So that's very, very rare, but it does happen. And as organizations, we encourage a culture of zero abuse and total respect. So it's really, really important that that is actually maintained. So that's the introduction. So this is the short video. The other two is going to be a little bit more sort of chunky, and in my next video we will be talking about teamwork.